There's a moment that happens to everyone, usually around 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, when you realize you've spent the entire day doing absolutely nothing that matters. You opened your laptop with good intentions. You had a list. You had plans. But somehow 6 hours disappeared into a fog of distractions, half-finished tasks, and that unique form of busy work that feels productive but produces nothing. And the worst part isn't the wasted time. The worst part is that familiar feeling creeping back in. That heavy, suffocating sensation that you felt 1,000 times before. Laziness. But here's what nobody tells you about laziness. It's not what you think it is. You've been lied to your entire life about what's actually happening when you can't get yourself to move, when you can't make yourself start, when you watch yourself procrastinate in real time and feel completely powerless to stop it. Because laziness isn't a personality trait. It's not a character flaw. It's not evidence that you're weak or broken or destined to fail. Laziness is a symptom. And symptoms can be cured when you understand what's causing them. In 1604, a 20-year-old warrior named Miyamoto Musashi stood in a clearing outside Kyoto, holding a wooden sword, staring at his own reflection in a small pond. He had just won his 12th duel to the death. 12 men had faced him with real steel, with every intention of killing him, and all 12 had failed. But Musashi wasn't celebrating. He was terrified. Not of his opponents. He was terrified of himself. Because he had noticed something during his most recent fight. A moment, barely a second long, where his body didn't respond. Where his mind gave the command to move and his muscles hesitated. It was so brief that his opponent never noticed. Musashi won the duel easily. But Musashi noticed. And he understood immediately what that hesitation meant. It meant that somewhere inside him, there was a part that wanted to stop. A part that wanted rest. A part that, if allowed to grow, would eventually get him killed. So Musashi made a decision that day. He decided to go to war with that part of himself. Not to suppress it or ignore it or try to overcome it with willpower. He decided to erase it completely. To kill it so thoroughly that it could never return. And the method he developed to do this, the system he created through years of isolation and practice, is the single most effective approach to eliminating laziness that has ever been documented. You're watching this video because you're tired of fighting yourself. You're tired of making promises on Sunday night that you break by Tuesday morning. You're tired of knowing what you need to do but somehow, mysteriously, not doing it. You're tired of watching other people accomplish things that you know you're capable of while you're stuck in the same place, having the same internal arguments, losing the same battles against yourself over and over again. And you've probably tried to fix this before. You've tried motivation. You've tried discipline. You've tried apps and systems and accountability partners. And some of it worked for a while. A week, maybe 2 weeks if you were really committed. But then something happened. Life got busy, or you got tired, or you just stopped feeling like it, and that old familiar fog rolled back in. The laziness returned. And with it came the shame. The disappointment. The quiet voice that says maybe this is just who you are. But what if I told you that every single attempt you've made to overcome laziness has failed for the same reason? Not because you're weak, but because you've been fighting the wrong enemy. Before I show you exactly what Musashi discovered about the true nature of laziness, and more importantly, how he developed a system to erase it permanently from his life, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel right now and hit that like button. And here's why this matters. This isn't a motivation channel. Motivation is what got you to click on this video, but motivation is also what's going to make you forget everything you learn here by tomorrow morning. This channel is about systems. Ancient systems that were developed by people who couldn't afford to fail because failure meant death. Every video I create is designed to give you one tool, one method, one principle that actually works when you don't feel like it. When you're tired. When you're discouraged. When every part of you wants to quit. So subscribe now. Turn on that notification bell, and then drop a comment telling me this. What's the one thing you know you should be doing every single day but you keep finding ways to avoid? Just that one thing. Write it in the comments right now. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't theory. It's a combat method. A system designed by a warrior who understood that the battle against laziness is literally a matter of life and death. Let's begin. The first thing you need to understand is that Musashi didn't see laziness as a moral failing. He saw it as an enemy. And not just any enemy. The most dangerous enemy you'll ever face. Because every other enemy is external. Every other challenge comes from outside yourself. You can prepare for it, strategize against it, develop skills to overcome it. But laziness is different. Laziness lives inside you. It knows your weaknesses because it is your weakness. It knows exactly when you're vulnerable because it's always watching, always waiting for the moment when your guard drops. It knows which excuses work because it's the part of you that creates the excuses. And here's the thing that makes it truly terrifying. Laziness doesn't want to kill you quickly. It wants to kill you slowly. So slowly that you don't even notice it's happening until you wake up one day, 10 years older, and realize you're living a life that's a shadow of what you once believed you were capable of. Musashi understood this because he had seen it happen to other warriors. Men who were skilled, talented, disciplined in their youth. But somewhere along the way, they started making small compromises. Skipping one day of practice. Then 2 days. Then a week. And each compromise made the next one easier until eventually they weren't warriors anymore. They were just men who used to be warriors. Men who told stories about what they once were instead of living what they could become. So Musashi developed what he called the Doctrine of No Gaps. It's not mentioned explicitly in the Book of 5 Rings, but it's woven throughout every principle he taught. The Doctrine of No Gaps means this. Between the moment you decide to do something and the moment you actually do it, there must be no space for laziness to enter. None. Zero. Because that's where laziness lives. In the gap between decision and action. Think about your own life right now. How many times today did you decide to do something and then not do it? You decided to start working on that project, but first you needed to check your email. You decided to go to the gym, but first you needed to finish this one thing. You decided to make that phone call, but first you needed to prepare what you were going to say. Every single one of those, but first, moments is a gap. And in that gap, laziness grows. It starts as a whisper. Just a small delay. A tiny postponement. But each gap you allow makes the next gap larger. Makes the next delay longer. Makes the next excuse more convincing. Until eventually the gap becomes your entire life. You become someone who spends all day deciding to do things and none of the day actually doing them. Musashi's solution was radical. He trained himself to eliminate the gap completely. The moment he decided to move, he moved. No pause. No hesitation. No negotiation with himself about whether it was the right time or if he felt ready or if conditions were perfect. Decision and action became the same thing. And he didn't develop this ability through willpower or motivation. He developed it through practice. Brutal, repetitive, unglamorous practice that most people would never have the patience for. Here's what he actually did. Every morning, 4 years, Musashi would wake before dawn and immediately draw his sword. Not after he felt ready. Not after he warmed up. Not after he had his tea. The moment consciousness returned to his body, his hand was already reaching for the weapon. He practiced this transition, from sleep to full combat readiness, thousands of times. Because he understood something that modern self-help completely misses. The body learns through repetition, not through understanding. Your brain can comprehend a concept instantly. But your body, your nervous system, your automatic responses, they only learn through repeated action. And the action he was teaching his body was simple. When the mind decides, the body obeys immediately, without question, without delay, without negotiation. Now I want you to think about how you start your day. For most people, it goes something like this. The alarm goes off. But you're tired. You tell yourself you'll just rest for 5 more minutes. Those 5 minutes become 15. Or 30. Or you hit snooze so many times you've trained yourself to sleep through the alarm. And in that moment, in those first 5 seconds of your day, you've already lost. Because you've opened a gap. You've created a space between what you decided to do, which was wake up at a certain time, and what you actually did, which was negotiate with yourself and choose comfort over commitment. And your body learned something from that. It learned that your decisions are negotiable. That when discomfort appears, you retreat. That you can't be trusted to do what you say you're going to do. And it will remember that lesson later, when you're trying to start a difficult project, or go to the gym, or have a hard conversation, or do anything that requires you to overcome resistance. Your body will remember that you're the kind of person who negotiates, who delays, who finds ways to avoid what's hard. That's what Musashi was erasing. Not laziness itself, but the pattern of allowing gaps where laziness could exist. And right here, I need to stop and ask you something directly. Because I can see the view count on this video climbing, and I know thousands of people are watching this right now, but what I don't know is your specific struggle. I don't know which part of what I just described hit you the hardest. Was it the recognition that you've been opening gaps all day, every day, without realizing it? Was it the understanding that your body has learned you can't be trusted? Or was it something else? Maybe you saw yourself in that description of waking up and immediately negotiating. Maybe you realized that pattern doesn't just happen in the morning. It happens with everything. Every task. Every commitment. Every promise you make to yourself. So I want you to do something for me right now. Go to the comment section and type this exact phrase. My biggest gap is. And then finish that sentence honestly. It could be, my biggest gap is between deciding to work out and actually working out. Or, my biggest gap is between planning my day and following through with the plan. Or, my biggest gap is between knowing what I should do and actually doing it. Whatever it is, write it down. Because here's what happens when you do this. First, you're making the invisible visible. You're taking something that's been operating in the background of your life and bringing it into conscious awareness. And awareness is the first step to change. Second, you're going to scroll through the comments and see hundreds of other people who wrote almost the exact same thing you did. And you're going to realize this isn't just your problem. This is a human problem. And if it's a human problem, it has a human solution. So go ahead right now. Type, my biggest gap is, finish the sentence, and hit post. I read every single comment, and I'm going to address the most common gaps in upcoming videos. Your struggle right now might become someone else's breakthrough later. Do it now. I'll wait.
The second principle Musashi developed is what he called cutting at the roots. Most people try to fight laziness by attacking the symptoms. They try to force themselves to be productive. They try to motivate themselves with rewards or punish themselves with guilt. They try to use willpower to push through resistance. And all of those approaches fail for the same reason. They're fighting at the wrong level. Musashi understood that laziness doesn't start with your behavior. It starts with your perception. Specifically, it starts with how you perceive effort. Most people have been trained, usually without realizing it, to see effort as something negative. Something to be avoided or minimized. Something that signals you're not smart enough or talented enough to find an easier way. And this perception creates a fundamental conflict inside you. Part of you knows that anything worthwhile requires effort. But another part of you, the part that's been trained to avoid discomfort, sees effort as evidence of failure. So you're stuck. Paralyzed between knowing what you should do and being unable to make yourself do it because your brain has categorized the required effort as a threat. Musashi cut at the root of this perception through a practice he called welcoming hardship. He deliberately sought out difficult situations. Not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he was retraining his perception. Teaching his mind to see effort differently. There's a famous story about Musashi during his period of wandering. He arrived at a small village during winter and asked for shelter. The village elder offered him a room with a fire, blankets, warm food. Everything he needed to be comfortable. Musashi refused. Instead, he asked permission to sleep in a storage shed with no heat. The elder thought he was crazy, but allowed it. For 3 months, Musashi slept in that freezing shed. He would wake up with frost on his blankets. His hands would be so cold he could barely grip his sword for the first hour of practice. And every morning, the village elder would offer him the warm room. And every morning Musashi would refuse. Why? Because he was killing his need for comfort. He was erasing the part of himself that wanted easy over effective. He was teaching his body that discomfort isn't a threat, it's just a sensation. And sensations can be observed without being obeyed. Now I want to be very clear about something because this is where most people misunderstand Musashi's philosophy. He wasn't practicing suffering for suffering's sake. He wasn't trying to be tough or prove anything to anyone. He was conducting a very specific form of training. He was learning to separate the sensation of discomfort from the meaning he assigned to it. Because here's what happens in your brain when you encounter something difficult. Your body sends a signal. This is hard. This is uncomfortable. This requires effort. And your mind immediately adds a story to that signal. This is bad. I should stop. Something's wrong. I'm not capable of this. And it's the story, not the sensation, that stops you. The story is what creates laziness. Musashi trained himself to experience the sensation without believing the story. To feel cold without deciding that cold was unbearable. To feel fatigue without deciding that fatigue meant he should stop. To feel resistance without deciding that resistance meant he was on the wrong path. And the more he practiced this separation, the more his perception changed. Effort stopped being something to avoid and became something neutral. Just information. Just feedback. Just part of the process. You can apply this principle starting today, right now, without sleeping in a frozen shed. Here's how. The next time you notice yourself avoiding something because it feels hard or uncomfortable, or like too much effort, pause. Don't try to motivate yourself. Don't try to push through. Just observe what's actually happening. Feel the sensation in your body. Where is the resistance? Is it in your chest, your stomach, your shoulders? What does it actually feel like, without the story? And then, this is the key part, do the thing anyway. Not because you've overcome the resistance. Not because you've made the resistance go away. But while the resistance is still there. While you're still feeling it. While your body is still sending that this is hard signal. You do it anyway. And what you're teaching yourself in that moment is profound. You're teaching yourself that the sensation of difficulty is not a stop sign. It's just weather. It's just something that's happening while you do what needs to be done. And the more you practice this, the more your perception changes. The same task that felt impossible last week starts to feel merely difficult. The same effort that felt unbearable starts to feel normal. Not because the task got easier, but because you got stronger. Not physically stronger. Perceptually stronger. You've changed what effort means to you. The third principle Musashi used to erase laziness is the most counterintuitive, and it's the one that most people resist. He called it the practice of deliberate incompetence. Here's what that means. Most people avoid doing things because they're afraid of doing them badly. They wait until they feel ready, until they feel confident, until they feel like they know enough to succeed. And while they're waiting, they do nothing. They're paralyzed by the fear of incompetence. So they choose inaction, which feels safer than action that might reveal they're not as capable as they want to believe. Musashi understood that this fear of incompetence was actually a form of ego protection. Your ego wants you to look good, to be seen as capable, to never reveal weakness or limitation. And it will sacrifice your growth to maintain that image. So Musashi developed a practice specifically designed to kill that ego attachment. He would deliberately practice techniques he was bad at, in front of other people, without trying to hide his incompetence. There's a documented account of Musashi, already famous as one of the greatest swordsmen in Japan, attending a calligraphy class and producing work that was objectively terrible. The teacher didn't know who he was and criticized his technique openly. And Musashi thanked him and asked him to criticize more specifically so he could improve. He did this with multiple skills: painting, poetry, sculpture. He would begin as a complete beginner, produce objectively bad work, receive criticism, and continue anyway.
Why? Because he was training himself to separate his worth from his performance. He was teaching himself that being bad at something doesn't mean anything about his value as a person. It just means he's at the beginning of learning that particular skill. And once he killed that ego attachment, once he erased the fear of looking incompetent, something remarkable happened. He became capable of learning anything. Because learning requires being willing to be bad first. It requires being willing to fail, to struggle, to look foolish, to ask basic questions, to produce work that's worse than what other people can produce. And most people can't tolerate that. Their ego won't allow it. So they stay stuck, only doing things they already know how to do, trapped in the prison of their current capabilities. Here's how this connects to laziness. That project you're avoiding, that task you keep postponing, that goal you can't seem to start working toward, why are you avoiding it? If you're honest with yourself, it's probably because you're afraid you won't do it well. You're afraid you'll try and fail. You're afraid you'll reveal to yourself or others that you're not as capable as you want to be. And that fear manifests as laziness. You don't call it fear. You call it not being in the mood, or not having enough time, or waiting for the right moment. But underneath all those stories is the same thing. Fear of incompetence. Fear of being bad at something. Musashi's solution was to embrace incompetence deliberately, to seek it out, to become so comfortable with being bad at things that it no longer had the power to stop him. And you can do the same thing. Start by choosing one thing, something you want to learn or accomplish, and commit to being terrible at it for 30 days. Don't try to be good. Don't try to impress anyone. Don't try to hide your mistakes or make excuses. Just practice being bad at something and notice what happens. Notice the voice in your head that says you should stop, that this is embarrassing, that you're wasting your time if you can't do it well. And do it anyway. Keep practicing while that voice is screaming. And gradually, something will shift. The voice will get quieter. Not because you got better at the skill, but because you stopped caring what the voice thinks. You stopped needing to be good at everything immediately. You gave yourself permission to be in the learning phase, which is always uncomfortable and often humiliating. And once you have that permission, once you've killed that need to appear competent, laziness loses one of its most powerful weapons. Because you're no longer avoiding things out of fear of failure. You're willing to fail. You expect to fail. Failure is just part of the process now, not something to be avoided at all costs. The fourth and final principle Musashi used is what he called the elimination of comfort rituals. This one's going to hurt because everyone has comfort rituals, and most people don't even realize they're doing them. A comfort ritual is anything you do before doing the actual thing you need to do that serves no practical purpose except to make you feel more ready. Let me give you examples. You need to start writing that report. But first, you need your coffee to be exactly the right temperature. You need your desk to be perfectly organized. You need the right playlist. You need to check your email one more time. You need to sharpen all your pencils even though you're working on a computer. Each of these is a comfort ritual. A little thing you do to ease the discomfort of starting. And here's the problem with comfort rituals. They work. Temporarily. They make you feel a little better, a little more ready, a little more in control. But they also reinforce the belief that you need things to be a certain way before you can perform. They make you dependent on conditions being right instead of being able to execute regardless of conditions. And every comfort ritual you indulge makes you slightly weaker. Slightly less capable of acting when circumstances aren't perfect. Musashi eliminated comfort rituals systematically. He trained himself to fight regardless of conditions. With any weapon or no weapon. On any terrain. In any weather. When he was well rested or exhausted. When he was fed or hungry. He specifically sought out uncomfortable conditions to practice in because he wanted to prove to himself that his ability to perform wasn't dependent on comfort. There's a famous duel where Musashi arrived late deliberately, forcing his opponent to wait in the sun for hours, getting tired and frustrated. But here's what most people miss about that story. Musashi wasn't late because he was being strategic about his opponent's state. He was late because he was training himself not to need preparation rituals. He didn't need to arrive early to warm up, to get mentally ready, to scope out the terrain. He trained himself to be able to arrive and immediately fight at full capacity without any ritual or preparation. That's real strength. Not performing well under ideal conditions. Performing well under any conditions. Starting immediately when needed, not when you feel ready.
Look at your own life right now. How many comfort rituals are controlling you? How many things do you tell yourself you need before you can start? And I'm not talking about practical preparation. I'm talking about the little superstitions and habits that serve no purpose except to make you feel more comfortable with the discomfort of beginning. Maybe you need your workspace to look a certain way. Maybe you need to have eaten the right breakfast. Maybe you need to have enough time ahead of you so you don't feel rushed. Maybe you need other people to be in a good mood. Maybe you need to feel motivated or inspired or energized. Every single one of those needs is a weakness. Every single one is a gap where laziness can enter. Because life doesn't care about your needs. Life doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Opportunities appear and disappear. Moments pass. And if you can't act immediately, regardless of conditions, you'll spend your life watching other people seize the opportunities you were waiting to feel ready for. So here's what you do. Identify your biggest comfort ritual. That one thing you always need before you can start. And for the next 7 days, eliminate it. If you always need coffee before you can work, work before you have coffee. If you always need your desk clean, work with a messy desk. If you always need a certain amount of time, start with only 15 minutes available. What you're doing is training yourself the same way Musashi trained. You're proving to yourself that you can perform without comfort. That you can start without being ready. That you're not dependent on conditions being perfect. And each time you do this, each time you act despite the absence of your comfort ritual, you're erasing laziness. You're killing the part of you that waits. That needs. That negotiates. You're becoming someone who simply moves when movement is required. Now we reach the moment of truth. Everything I've shared with you today, the doctrine of no gaps, cutting at the roots, practicing deliberate incompetence, eliminating comfort rituals, all of it is useless if you don't understand the final piece. The piece Musashi considered most important. The piece he spent the last years of his life perfecting in isolation before writing it down in the Book of Five Rings. Identity transformation. Because here's what Musashi understood that most people never grasp. You cannot behave your way into becoming a different person. Behavior change is temporary. It lasts as long as your willpower lasts, as long as your motivation lasts, as long as conditions remain favorable. But identity change is permanent. When you change who you are at the core, behavior changes automatically because the new behaviors are simply what the new you does naturally. Think about it like this. You can force yourself to exercise every day through discipline and willpower. And maybe you keep it up for a month, or 3 months, or even a year. But you're fighting yourself the entire time because at your core, you still see yourself as someone who doesn't like exercise. You're doing exercise, but you're not an exerciser. And the moment life gets difficult or your willpower runs out, you'll stop. Because people always return to behavior that matches their identity. But if you change your identity first, if you become someone for whom exercise is part of who you are, then not exercising feels wrong. Feels like a betrayal of yourself. You don't have to force yourself to exercise anymore because exercise is just what you do. It's part of your identity. Musashi didn't force himself to practice 8 hours a day through willpower. He became someone for whom 8 hours of practice was natural. He didn't see himself as a person who happened to practice swordsmanship. He saw himself as a swordsman, and practicing 8 hours was just what swordsmen do. The behavior flowed from the identity, not the other way around. So if you want to erase laziness permanently, you can't just change your behavior. You have to change who you believe you are. You have to stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles with laziness, and start seeing yourself as someone for whom immediate action is natural. Someone for whom effort is normal. Someone for whom discipline isn't a thing you do, it's who you are. And how do you change your identity? Not through affirmations or visualization or any of that surface-level stuff. You change your identity through evidence. Every time you close a gap, every time you act despite discomfort, every time you practice incompetence, every time you eliminate a comfort ritual, you're creating evidence. Evidence that you're someone different than you thought you were. Evidence that you're capable of things you didn't think you could do. Evidence that the old identity, the one built on laziness and hesitation and comfort-seeking, that identity is dying. And a new one is being born. Musashi called this process becoming empty. Not empty like hollow or purposeless, Empty like a vessel that's been cleared of everything unnecessary. Empty of ego, of comfort addiction, of the need to feel ready. Empty of all the stories you've been telling yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. And when you become empty in that way, when you clear out all the accumulated identity baggage, something remarkable happens. You discover that the person you've been trying to become through force and effort, that person was always there underneath. You weren't building discipline. You were removing everything that was blocking your natural capacity for discipline. You weren't developing strength. You were removing your attachment to weakness. Laziness isn't something you have to overcome. It's something you have to stop creating. Stop opening gaps, and laziness has nowhere to live. Stop assigning negative meaning to effort, and laziness has nothing to feed on. Stop protecting your ego from incompetence, and laziness loses its power. Stop requiring comfort, and laziness can't control you. And what's left, when all of that is stripped away, is the person you've always been underneath. The person who acts immediately when action is required. The person who does hard things because hard things are what's necessary. The person who doesn't negotiate, or delay, or make excuses because those behaviors belong to someone you used to be.
So here's my challenge to you. Not tomorrow. Not on Monday. Right now. What's one thing you've been avoiding? What's one task, one conversation, one project, one change you know you need to make but you keep finding ways to delay? Think about it for 5 seconds. Got it? Good. Now close this video and go do it. Right now. Before you watch anything else. Before you check your phone. Before you get comfortable or get coffee or feel ready. Right now, while the resistance is screaming, go do it. And you're going to notice something. It's not going to be as hard as you thought it would be. The anticipation of doing hard things is always worse than actually doing them. The gap between thinking about it and doing it is where all the suffering lives. Once you're in action, once you've closed the gap, it's just action. It's just movement. It's just you doing what needs to be done. And when you finish, even if you do it badly, even if it's not perfect, even if you're uncomfortable the whole time, you'll have proof. Proof that you're not who you thought you were. Proof that you're becoming someone different. Someone who doesn't negotiate with laziness anymore because laziness isn't part of your identity. Musashi spent 60 years developing these principles, testing them in combat where a single moment of hesitation meant death. You don't have to fight to the death, but you do have to fight. Against the part of you that wants to delay, that wants comfort, that wants to feel ready before starting. That part has to die. Not metaphorically. Actually die. Erased completely. Killed through repeated action that proves it was never necessary in the first place. Subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already. Turn on the notification bell. Because every video I create is designed to give you one more weapon in this fight. One more principle from warriors and monks and people throughout history who achieved levels of discipline that seem impossible. But they're not impossible. They're just rare. Rare because most people aren't willing to do what's necessary. Most people would rather live with laziness than kill the part of themselves that creates it. But you're not most people. You wouldn't have watched this far if you were. You're someone who's ready to change. Who's tired of the old patterns. Who's willing to do what's uncomfortable to become who you're capable of being. So subscribe. Hit that like button. And drop a comment telling me this. What's the one behavior, the one habit, the one pattern you're going to erase starting today? Just one sentence. Because when you write it down publicly, when you declare it, you're creating accountability. You're making it real. And other people who are fighting the same battle are going to see your comment and realize they're not alone. Your commitment might be the thing that gives someone else the courage to start their own transformation. Do it now. Write it down. Make it real. And then go take the first action that proves your old identity is dead and something new is being born. I'll see you in the next video.